Hello and welcome to another episode of Fractional Impact. Today we're speaking to Austin Smiley, who specializes in helping companies move from reactive decision-making to intentional growth. We'll talk about why many growing companies feel stuck despite strong revenue, how leaders can uncover hidden profit, and what effective fractional CFO support really looks like inside operationally complex businesses. Austin, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you, Stuart. Absolutely. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me. What I do is I work with founder-led companies that usually have pretty strong revenue but have limited financial clarity. Most of them might not necessarily have a margin problem, but they definitely have a visibility problem into their financials. I help them unlock profitability and growth by installing forecast discipline, tightening pricing architecture, and tying financial insight to operational decisions. Companies can grow their EBITDA while working with me, not just because we add revenue, but because we help improve their structure as well.
Awesome. And we're also joined by Gianna Maliari, as usual.
Thanks, Stuart. I'm part of the fractional clients team, doing things sales and client delivery with Stuart, and I'm really excited to get into everything today with you, Austin.
Same here, Gianna.
Awesome. So, Austin, kick us off by telling us about everything you've been doing over your career and more recently as well.
Yeah, absolutely, Stuart. So I've had an exciting career. I've worked at a lot of very large companies in a lot of different industries in a variety of different financial roles, covered a lot of IT things, done a lot of executive work. And over the last 15 years, what I'd like to think I've gotten very good at is really assessing a business's financials and really uncovering their opportunities and their weaknesses. I've had the opportunity over the last few years to work with a lot of smaller businesses in the couple million range, all the way up to the 100 million, hundreds of millions range. Right now, I'm focusing on helping small to mid-sized businesses, usually in maybe the 5 to 50 million range, grow their businesses by helping them assess their financials. A lot of times they need help setting that up and getting processes in place. And then what I do once I'm able to help them put together their strategic financial architecture is really tie that to their operations, tie that to their goals, and put them in a position where they can start to hit their targets more reliably and more successfully.
Yeah, you mentioned there that commonly it's the 5 to 10 million revenue mark that you come into companies. What types of financial problems do you usually see at that 5 to 10 million mark?
That's a great question, and I'm sure a lot of the listeners here are wondering that as well. I can tell you reliably, almost every single time what you're going to see break first is processes or the lack thereof. Oftentimes in any business in the 5 to 10 million dollar range, once your processes start to lag, that's when you're going to start to feel some pain. That's when you're going to start to see some things break. You really can't scale very far without solid processes. One of the first ones that becomes a challenge is the chart of accounts and account management. Business owners need to be able to track their revenue and their expenses, and they need to be able to track them consistently, reliably, so that they don't have to dig for answers. If you don't have a good structure in place for your chart of accounts, then the rest of your financial analysis is going to start to get a little shaky, start to take a lot more time and effort. Obviously, one of the things that starts to get more complex as you grow a business as well is the monthly close. You need to make sure that's really tight and buttoned up. And as you grow, different aspects are going to start to come into play with that. And so you're going to have to adjust and expand your processes there as well. I will say lastly, the most critical thing at the 5 to 10 million dollar mark is getting your forecasting into a really good spot. This becomes crucial for your ability to grow and scale. And if you don't really have your processes nailed down on the finance front, then you're going to start to see gaps. You're going to start to experience more volatility, and it's going to lead to more cash strain in your business when you're at this size.
Do you find that forecasting, working at quite operationally complicated companies such as manufacturing companies, do you find forecasting can be quite tough at that type of revenue level?
I do see that, especially the larger you get and the more complex you get, the tougher it can get. But if you have good processes, and that's why that's the key here, in place, then that's going to take so much pressure off the rest of it. If you don't have those good processes, you're going to be spinning your wheels each week, each month, diving down different rabbit holes regularly, spending a lot of time and effort trying to get these answers. If you're able to have consistent and well executed processes in place, that's going to make the forecasting easier. Again, it's not simple, but it is easier if you have those good processes in place.
What does a good process look like to you? Is that a reporting structure? Is that a specific tech stack? What do you usually recommend?
It involves a lot of different things. When I come into a company, I have a checklist initially of probably 20 processes that we're going to look at first, all within the financial realm. You really want to have a nice, clean flow of activities. You want to have a good schedule in place. You want to have good frameworks in place with the account management that I mentioned. If you need some extra resource planning or some extra inventory planning tools, that's okay. A lot of the businesses I work with, what they're lacking is more on the finance side. They're not really doing a great job with their cash flow forecasting. They're not really doing a great job with their P&L management. They're not really doing a great job understanding where all their money is going every single time. And so just having clean processes in place and then having it be someone's responsibility to do it and someone's responsibility to check that it's getting done, then you're going to put yourself in a lot better position. It doesn't have to be this massive, complicated thing. Oftentimes, just putting the basics in place and making sure they're being executed on well solves a lot of the problems.
For these companies, I can see how they can get to that point where they get to a few million in revenue without standardized processes and with things being a little bit messy. But if they bring in someone, obviously there's a cost to sort out the processes. There's a big time cost as well to do that. What are the benefits? What are the outcomes and the reasons that makes it worthy?
Absolutely. No, that's a great question, Stuart. Why do any of this at all? If you're in a business and you're trying to grow it, you have a reason why. Ultimately, the reason to hire Austin Smiley, the reason to hire Smiley Strategy, the reason to hire any fractional CFO or any support to help grow your company at all is because you have goals that you want to hit, right? And the reason I love doing what I do is because I get to sit down with a business owner. I get to say, where do you want to be? Where are you at today? And the key piece, how do we bridge that gap, right? If we can break it down to a point where we say, okay, if we do these things every day and measure them in this way, we can expect with reasonable confidence that we're going to start to make progress towards these goals. Break it down to where you remove the uncertainty. That's massive value.
Yeah, it makes sense. A lot of the founders you'll speak with will kind of feel busy, but still while kind of lacking clarity. What do you see as flying by, or what does flying blind actually look like inside the growing companies that you work with?
That's a great question. When you're a business owner, eventually, certainly at the beginning, but once you're established, as you start to grow, you're going to start experiencing a little bit more hoping, a little bit more guessing. If you're flying blind, you're not really going to have that lack of confidence. If that continues, eventually it can start to lead to some chaos, certainly a lot of volatility. You start to hear yourself thinking, okay, I really hope this works, when maybe you shouldn't have that hope. You should have a little bit more confidence. Really, it comes down to if you're being reactive instead of proactive, then you might be in a position where you're kind of flying blind. You really want to have defined levers in your business that you can pull when you know something's wrong, when you see that metrics are off, when you see that there's an opportunity that you want to take advantage of. You want to have those defined ahead of time, and you want to know what's likely to happen when you pull on those levers. This reminds me of a company I actually used to work with. They were experiencing double-digit revenue growth, right? They were growing top line very strongly. The margins actually did look healthy, but payroll was stressful every month. They were in a cash type position every couple of weeks. Their receivables were stretching, right? And expenses were starting to build up front as they were growing. And so what I helped them do right away is we installed a rolling cash forecast that was going to lay all of this out in a very digestible and approachable way so that we could understand where we need to start managing our cash a little bit more effectively in order to reduce that stress. And we were actually able to reduce that stress pretty much immediately after installing that forecast. The key here is understanding that profitability does not always guarantee liquidity.
Yeah. I guess the good thing for them is they were already experiencing double-digit revenue growth. So it's a little bit easier to, spend and make extra expenses when you're doing really well. How do you make the argument to companies that are maybe plateaued to bring in someone like yourself?
That's a great question as well. And so what I see when businesses are a little bit more cash constrained and they're wanting to grow, but they're not, they're kind of plateaued. If they are able, like I mentioned earlier, to break down their current state and break down their future state and understand what levers they need to pull to be able to get there, that's going to be something that'll enable them to break through where they're at. I mentioned processes earlier. It's really having a lack of defined processes in place across your company, especially financial processes, that don't allow you to have that confidence and that insight and that understanding of what do I need to do next to drive that next step in growth within my company.
Interesting. When you first step into a new engagement, what are the first numbers or signals that you're looking at to try and understand where profit might be being left on the table?
I always start with gross margin structure 9 times out of 10. And then I look at the contribution margin by segment. I try to get a feel for where the profit's coming from, where the revenue's coming from. I then look at their financials, assuming they're available and accurately reported. Look at them to understand, okay, where's the net margin landing? Where are the expenses landing on the top end, on the bottom end? I want to get a feel for, is this company well structured, right? And if they have good reporting, you can understand that relatively quickly most times. If a company doesn't even have good reporting, then that's where you usually need to start, is kind of getting that put together. But once you have that understanding of, okay, is this well structured? Where's some of the gaps, right? Are bottom line expenses too high? Are the margins incorrect at the top level? You can do some adjustments there, and really pretty quickly you start to uncover where the profit's hiding. And that reminds me of another story. We were just talking about cash constraint with one company. In this company, it was more of a margin issue, right? We were looking at their company margins and they looked pretty strong. But then when we broke it down by segment, we actually had one segment that was kind of subsidizing everything else. And the problem was they were growing intentionally and aggressively their lower margin work. And they didn't realize it was their lower margin work. It was just the easier stuff to get. But that was kind of slowing down the whole business, kind of creating a lot of lag. What we did was we rebalanced the pricing structure a little bit so that the margins were correct on the lower margin work. We also intentionally refocused the operations, the sales, the execution on some of the higher margin activities so that EBITDA within the company was a lot stronger, and we were able to increase that without even adding any new revenue streams. One of the key lessons from that is, revenue growth without margin clarity creates that false confidence. And that's where you get in a position where you're chasing one thing that you really maybe shouldn't be chasing.
Yeah. At the start there, you mentioned the first thing you look at is that gross margin structure. I'm showing how little I know about financial terms here. What exactly do you mean by gross margin structure? What is that?
No, that's understandable, Stuart. And a lot of business owners don't even know that much about their financials. You'd be surprised how big a company can get before they start to feel some of this issue in some cases. So what I'm talking about there is understanding, okay, you sell something for $10, costs you $7 to make it and get it out the door. That means your margin left over there is $3 at the top, right? $10 to in profit, $7 in expense. But then you got to pay your rent, and then you got to pay your electricity bill, right? And then you got to pay for your other bottom line expenses. And that takes out of that $3 million gross, maybe you have $1 left, or $3 gross, maybe you have $1 left over net after those other expenses come in.
Yeah. How would you go about fixing that if it's not very good? Because I know it's easier said than done, isn't it? To just spend less money while keeping revenue.
Well, the reason business owners oftentimes love speaking with me is when I get on the phone with them, when I get on a meeting with them, when I get in the room with them, what we start talking about is what do we need to focus on, right? And as a business owner, especially, you have probably 10,000 things on your mind every day. I can relate, right? But it's really helpful to have someone with the outside perspective present with the understanding of, okay, these are standard practices, these are standard gaps, this is the best approach to hit peak level performance. If someone comes to the room with that understanding, they can help you remove a lot of the uncertainty, remove a lot of the noise, and really focus on the main signal that you need to understand. It's a lot of easy, quote unquote, fixes that are harder to implement than they should be. But it's not like this is rocket science, right? And so when I come in and I say, okay, you don't even have your sales targets in place that you guys are looking at on a daily basis, of course you need to have that in place, right? Or when I come in and I see, okay, you guys aren't tracking your project margins, of course you need to be doing that. But business owners drop the ball, unfortunately, because they have so much to focus on. Some of them do an excellent job and don't need any assistance, and some of them are working really hard and just need that next level of insight to be provided to them, and that's where I come in to help.
Gianna, on you go.
Sorry. I was going to say, I feel like when you go through that sort of process with the founder, and perhaps if they're in that stage where they think, oh, well, it's been working so far, how do you help them realize that those decisions or those suggestions that you're making are actually worth certain trade-offs?
It's really about sitting down with a business owner and walking through their financials. What you need to do is show them where they're at, show them where they need to go, walk them through that so that they digest it. It makes a lot of sense. And then you're able to hone in on, okay, if we pull these levers and take these actions, it should have this financial impact. Once you're able to structure that and they see it, then you move forward together, right? And it is all about getting on the same page, making sure they understand, and you come forward together with your decisions.
Do you ever get any friction with maybe like a sales leader or an HR leader or some other sort of leader in the business where you want to change maybe how much money is being spent in a certain department, or you want to make any kind of change across the business and they don't like it? Does that happen much?
It happens more often than you'd like to think. And a lot of businesses have people within them that aren't set up to be able to grow the way they need to grow, right? And so they have ideologies or methodologies or approaches that have worked so far. And if the business needs to grow and the business owner needs to grow, the team needs to grow as well. And it's a similar approach where you sit down and you work together to find the solutions that you need to be able to hit the next level.
Yeah, interesting. You focus a lot on FP&A. Why is forecasting and planning often the biggest missing piece for founder-led businesses?
The reason is because it's not required when you're starting, and it's not really required for the first couple of million, the first couple of years, whatever it is. But once you get to a certain point, forecasting and planning does become a requirement to get to that next level. And obviously, every situation is unique, but you do start to see an underlying pattern of once you start to hit that point where you really need that next level of understanding, you're going to start to feel like you're flying blind again if you're not careful, right? And so it really comes down to what got you here isn't going to get you to the next level, right? And so you have to implement those effective strategic financial practices. You have to implement solid forecasting, solid planning to be able to move forward with confidence. Otherwise, you're going to be moving forward. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, but you're not going to have the same level of confidence that you could have.
Yeah.
When it comes to forecasting, planning, what does good hygiene actually look like? Is it a periodic thing? What is a structure that works? What does that look like to you?
It really does come down to being consistent. That's a mistake I see a lot of business owners make. They have their monthly close, they take a look at it. Maybe the cash looks good, maybe the cash looks bad. A lot of business owners don't know how cash ties to profit, and obviously there's a lot of timing involved with that. But when it comes down to it, in order to be really proactive instead of reactive, you kind of want to have daily metrics that you're looking at on the operations side, and you want to be looking at your cash every day as well. And then you want to be having weekly cash strategy reviews as well. And then that'll set you up to where okay, this is where we're probably going to end the month this month. You're already thinking ahead of time about how to adjust for that. You're not just waiting for the bad month to happen. You're fixing it while you're in that month. And so it's really important to make sure that they're paying attention as they're going throughout the day and throughout the week, and not just waiting for those monthly reviews and those quarterly reviews.
Some of your biggest achievements are in relation to helping companies create very large EBITDA growth in short time frames. What usually drives those gains early on?
That's another really great question, Stuart, because that's really the whole point of bringing in a fractional CFO, is to have an impact, right? And to make a difference sooner rather than later. You really want to have a company that's optimized and well structured. And when I come in and I see a company that has gaps, once we're able to normalize those gaps, you see kind of a snapback to where the company is operating strongly at that point, right? And whether that's pricing misalignment or cost gaps or some restructuring that you have to do, once the company is actually rebalanced and you uncover those hidden profit areas and take advantage of them, you see that impact quickly, right? And if you are in a position where your company has some hidden issues or some structural pieces that you're aware of, or maybe something's wrong, but you're just not 100% sure what it is, having that view and understanding of, okay, this is the problem area, this is what needs to be fixed. Once you solve for that, you're going to start to see results happen pretty much right away. And sometimes those results can be very significant.
Yeah. You mentioned there to do with changing pricing sometimes. And I could easily see how the biggest change to create growth, or certainly to create more margin, could be to increase pricing. How hard is it sometimes to work with maybe a marketing leader or a sales leader that's saying, no, we can't do that, we have to keep it the way it is? Or, why is the finance person telling us to change something that surely relates to marketing?
Right. Yeah, exactly. It really does help to get the whole team involved in these discussions sometimes, or at least the relevant parties of the team involved in these discussions sometimes, because then they can see, okay, this is where the company should be performing at in order to hit its targets. This is what's professionally accepted, right? It's top tier performance, but this is what we need to strive for. We're not just aiming for middle of the line here. Once you start to understand, okay, this is really what's possible, this is really where we need to be going, this is the numbers that support that, this is why we know that's the right answer, then it becomes a matter of, okay, how do we make that fit into our current structure, our current operations, right? Is it a pricing issue? Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. Sometimes it's an execution issue. There are a couple different things that you need to go through and consider there. But once you do identify, okay, this is the first pain point we're going to tackle, then it is really about effectively communicating that to everybody, breaking it down so that everyone sees and understands and is on the same page. And then at that point, you work together to move forward to drive the solutions. If you really do have someone that's kind of fighting the whole process and fighting growth, then the question becomes to them is, okay, what do you want out of all of this, right? Do you want to help us grow, or what are you trying to accomplish with your time here, right? And most people, once they think about it from that perspective, are excited to help and grow as part of a team.
Yeah, that's awesome. How do you help leaders tie financial data back to real operational decisions instead of just, static reports?
That's the great thing about strategic finance is it really does take those static reports that you look at, okay, this was what we did this past month, and it translates it into, okay, what does that mean within the business? What happened within the business to drive those results? And then you can start to tie your financials, okay, to our sales activities, to our operational activities, expenses, inventory, timing, all kinds of different aspects of your business, right? Services performed, all these different aspects drove those results. And so then you say, okay, what are each of these aspects of our business doing today, tomorrow, this week that are going to drive the financials at the end of this month, right? And so then you can totally reframe and flip it on its head from that financial lens and say, okay, based on what we did day 1, day 5, day 20, this is where we're going to end the month on day 30. And then you can even start to project it out quarterly and annually as well. And tying that together is really a very powerful part of having a strong CFO. And it's something that business owners get a lot of value out of, I can tell you.
Do you have a specific example of an operational decision that might have seemed small, but it actually had like a greater financial ripple effect?
Absolutely. When we talk about construction companies, and I've worked with quite a few of them, the estimating process, the bid process is oftentimes a piece that is working, but is sometimes a bottleneck. Sometimes there's some gaps on the follow-up. Sometimes there's not as much due diligence that needs to be done. If you optimize, especially the estimating, but then also the bidding process and implement follow-up and implement incentives, that's a spot, especially in construction companies, where a lot of success can be unlocked there, right? And it's not necessarily, again, heart surgery or rocket science, but it's these things that business owners are like, yes, that makes sense. Why weren't we doing that? There's not really a good answer. But having that financial lens of understanding, well, this is where your performance should be, this is where it is right now, and finding those opportunities to stack up to that success level is really powerful, right? And so that's a key example that I see oftentimes in that industry.
One thing that I don't quite understand is how do a lot of companies believe they have really good margins, but they still struggle with cash flow? Because for me, that just doesn't quite like add up. Where do you find that disconnect usually comes from?
Yeah, that's a disconnect a lot of business owners feel, and it can be very painful. What we're talking about here is working capital dynamics, right? And as you're growing, a lot of companies, their growth consumes their cash, right? And they think, oh, I just need to grow more and then I'll have more cash. But if you aren't managing your growth effectively, as you grow, your cash starts to disappear, and then you can get yourself in a lot of uncomfortable situations with your business, where I've seen businesses, have to fold because they grew too fast, right? And you wouldn't think that would be a risk, but it's absolutely a risk, especially in manufacturing, especially in construction, especially in any inventory heavy companies or even heavy cost companies where their services are expensive up front. There's always going to be a lag with your receivables, right? And there's a lot you can do to minimize that lag, but there's only so much you can do to minimize that lag, right? And you really have to understand that profit, as you're getting more and more profitable, that doesn't equal liquidity right away. And as a business owner, especially if it's an owner-led company or a founder-led company, the leadership bandwidth starts to become the constraint, right? And they need good processes. They need some capacity on the financial side, either them or somebody, and they need some systems in place, ideally, to be able to monitor that and have their finger literally on the pulse of their business every day to be able to stay on top of that. Does that make sense, Stuart?
Yeah. What do you find usually the fix is? Like if there's a company that is doing well, this year, good margins, good cash, but they want to reinvest it, for growth, where it might be a little bit risky and, cash flight might be, not very, well, they might basically go into debt. Do you find it's best to just take out a loan, change the pricing structure or the payment structure so that they get paid more upfront, so they have more cash? What do you find is typically the best solution?
There's a lot of solutions there. You mentioned a few of them there, Stuart. I'd say the most important solution is a proactive solution, right? And so having good debt management, having an extremely tight cash flow forecast for the next quarter, even through the end of the year, or through the next 12 months, having a really good understanding of how your debt payments are going to impact your cash over the next quarter. If you're looking at a loan, how is that going to continue to impact you over the next quarter or the next 6 months or the next several years even? Having that understanding ahead of time allows you to make effective decisions on, okay, what can we afford for debt, right? What rates are we going to be able to spend? What timelines are we going to be able to look at? What are our hard requirements for receivables and payables? What can we do to increase our line of credit to the highest we can get it to be able to weather any sort of opportunities or times of hardship and strain within the business? All of those answers become a lot clearer once you have that proactive insight in place, right? Oftentimes in manufacturing and in construction companies, having a really strong line of credit when you don't need it is the solution that you wish you had when you do need it. And so many times they don't have the line of credit built up like it should be. A lot of service companies, one of the solutions for them is debt management, right? And looking at loans if you have opportunities. But you just have to be really careful of what you're committing to, and having that insight ahead of time helps you make those decisions.
Yeah. When companies are either preparing to scale, or maybe they want to sell, or maybe they want to get some sort of external financing, how does the financial strategy leading up to that event change when they're trying to maybe prioritize increase in valuation over something else?
Yeah, well, that's kind of a great question there. You really do introduce quite a few additional aspects when you're talking about adding debt that you really have to be careful on. I heard you mention valuation there also, and when you're adding debt, that's definitely going to impact your valuation. The change that comes with that is you have to be really intentional and careful about tracking all of that. And again, leadership bandwidth becomes a constraint, because if you don't have somebody paying close attention to that consistently, it might slip off of your plate, and then you can get yourself in a bad situation potentially.
Interesting. What does a high impact fractional CFO support actually look like on a weekly or monthly basis for you inside a $10 to $50 million company?
Really what we're doing is positioning the business and the leaders to understand financially the path to their goals, right? A lot of CFOs come in and they've got a really good approach to reporting, but sometimes that's where it stops, right? And a really high impact fractional CFO is going to bring strategy and execution conversation as well. And what that looks like is not only looking at the reporting and having solid reporting, but then installing a good financial architecture within the company to where people are paying attention to what they need to be paying attention to and acting on those things quickly so that you're able to have that impact sooner rather than later, right? That reminds me of a company I worked with, a contractor. They were losing money. They were losing a lot of money every month, hundreds of thousands of dollars. And they came to me, they brought me in. What we found immediately was a structural misalignment, right? And I showed it to them in their financials. I showed it to them in their operations report, their work in progress. And they said, yeah, we kind of knew, this wasn't a good situation. We just weren't sure what to do about it. We kind of wanted to ride it out. And they got to the point where it was getting tighter and tighter and they needed something fixed right away. So we rebuilt their forecasting discipline. We rebuilt their operations approach. We made sure that they were executing the correct projects, that they were following up on their receivables. We tightened pricing. We tightened the cost accountability. They were carrying so much weight that we were able to remove and transfer and shift and refocus their operations to be a lot more profitable. And that financial clarity is really what restored control for that company.
In your recent fractional CFO work, how long do you think it takes to get a company sort of basically an ROI on your services? So like if a company signs up with you on day one, when do they actually start seeing their investment being paid back to them in some sort of benefit?
Owners can feel and see the return within the first week. What that looks like is meetings with the fractional CFO, me. What that looks like is deliverables from the fractional CFO. Even if they don't see the financials skyrocket on day one, what they are going to see is additional clarity. What they're going to feel is additional confidence right away that, okay, we're starting to tackle what needs to be tackled. We're going to see the improvements that we need to see within our business. And within a couple of weeks, they should start to really understand, okay, this is how we're going to start to maximize our profitability in these situations, whatever it is they're facing. And honestly, once you start to see that and understand the plan, it's up to the business owners and the teams oftentimes of how quickly they want to act on that and how quickly they want to execute on the plan. And business owners that are ready for that quick improvement, it's up to them to take that heavy hitting action right away. But once you outline the picture for them clearly, they're excited for it and they know and they have that confidence and they should be able to have that impact sooner rather than later. And obviously every situation is different, but in my experience, you start to see profitability impacts within months, oftentimes.
And how do you know when a business is ready for a full-time CFO versus continued fractional leadership, perhaps?
That's an answer with a question with a lot of answers. The answer is it depends, right? If a business loves their fractional CFO, oftentimes they try to bring them in. If a business is getting to the point where they have so much complexity and they have so much demand and so many different aspects going on, then you really do need to say, okay, we need a dedicated person and they need a whole team under them. It doesn't make sense to limit the company just for the sake of one fractional CFO, right? But honestly, it's similar to how are you ready for a fractional CFO? If you're feeling that stress, if you're feeling that uncertainty, if you're feeling that lack of clarity, your fractional CFO is going to solve that for you. And honestly, a good fractional CFO will be the first one to say, okay, we're getting to the point where more time is required here. And sooner rather than later, that's going to turn into full time.
You'll have heard the phrase, I'm sure, revenue, or what is it? Revenue is vanity, profit is sanity. How do you kind of help business owners sometimes realize that growing revenue shouldn't always be the priority, and sometimes the real thing they need to focus on is improving their margins?
Absolutely. This one is a straightforward approach for me. It's all about illustrating the future, illustrating those projections with the business owner, showing them those trade-offs. Do you understand? Make sure that it's landing, that it's resonating with them. They should be able to understand this is what's happening in the business. This is why revenue is vanity and profit is sanity. And they should be on board. And once you have that clarity, then you can drive your priorities forward together.
Yeah, it makes sense. What are the warning signs that a company might have outgrown its existing finance function?
I love this question. There's so many warning signs that business owners start to feel. First thing that a business owner should be able to answer in my mind for this is, do you know where your money is going, right? Do you know where your money is coming from, right? And you should be having those weekly and honestly daily cash views, right? But then weekly assessments, monthly assessments. You should have that year-end visibility. If any of those are missing, then that's a big warning sign. Another big warning sign is if your financials aren't actually informing your decisions, then you're wasting all that analysis, right? You'd be surprised how many really large companies I've seen that have good financials in place, and even small and mid-sized companies that they have those good financials in place, they're not using them. And they're making bad decisions where they could be making more effective decisions if they would just leverage the information they have in front of them, right? Another warning sign is if your margin visibility is weak, right? You need to be tracking, especially as you're growing, you need to be tracking, okay, where's the profitability really coming from across my company? And most times when I ask a business owner, how are your financial processes right now? Are they being executed effectively? If they're honest with themselves with that candid question, oftentimes the answer is we have room for improvement, and that self-assessment, I think, is really powerful as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. What's the most expensive financial mistake you repeatedly see founders make?
That ties into what we were just talking about. It's just not paying attention to the numbers and not using the data to direct your actions and decisions. You need those daily KPIs in place financially, operationally. You need the weekly KPIs in place. You need to have that visibility of that dashboard that's really usable and accessible, to where you know every day, okay, this is what was off yesterday. This is what we need to adjust for today. A lot of business owners just look at the monthly, just look at the quarterly. Some of them don't even have forecasting. If you aren't looking at your numbers and paying attention to them, that gets really expensive. It can get really expensive really quickly. And so many business owners know they need to do it and they just don't. And that's a mistake that I see made regularly.
What do you think financial clarity actually gives founders that's not just about numbers?
It's all about confidence, right? And that having clarity in your financials and having the understanding of how those financials strategically reflect in your operations improves your ability to make confident decisions, right? Every business owner knows there's a lot of risk associated with a lot of the decisions they make, and reducing that risk and increasing your confidence is so valuable. And not just valuable, it increases your likelihood of success significantly, right? And by unlocking that next level of clarity and removing that noise, there's so much value there, and business owners see it, business owners feel it, and they love it when that comes into play. And that's why, as I mentioned earlier, a high impact CFO increases the clarity of your strategy and the clarity of your decision making. It doesn't just give you the reporting and let you do that on your own, right?
Why do you think a lot of founders are hesitant to really get into the numbers? Do you think they just deprioritize it because there's more important things to do? Do you think it's a bit like looking at the bill after going to a fancy restaurant where you're kind of scared to actually see the numbers? What do you think stops them from taking a look?
I love that example, Stuart, and that's something I'm sure a lot of business owners and individuals can relate to. There's a lot of uncertainty in business, a lot of uncertainty in life, and that generates fear, right? And fear honestly keeps most business owners where they're at, or drives them into where they're declining. If you're in a position where you have a good financial partner that is helping you establish your strategy, you're going to remove not just the confusion and the uncertainty, you're going to remove the fear, right? And that's why I love having conversations with business owners, diving deeper into this. My company, Smiley Strategy, we even offer a complimentary profit rebuild assessment for businesses that might be interested in becoming clients, but they don't have to become clients. And we look at where are they at now, where do they need to go, where's that uncertainty, and that shines a light on where the fear is coming from, right? And you have to look at the numbers, you have to look at the financials, you have to look at the bill, which you might not want to look at, as you said, Stuart, and have that understanding. And once you have that understanding, it might be uncomfortable and it might be difficult, but then the confidence comes in, okay, this is how we're going to move forward. I think a lot of business owners don't have the wherewithal already. They don't have the understanding of the financials. And even if they do, maybe they are too busy. There's a lot of reasons that could be coming into play there, but there's a lot of reasons why a strong, high impact fractional CFO is someone that's good to have on your team then as well.
Yeah. Tell us about the profit rebuild assessment. Who's it for? What does it do?
Absolutely. For business owners that are usually in that 5 to 50 million range, but a little smaller or a lot bigger, we work with those companies as well. But if you're a business owner that is looking to have more growth with clarity and understanding and confidence, what we do in that assessment is we say, okay, where are you at today? Where do you want to go? And we do a quick deep dive on your operations, on your financials, start to highlight some of those imbalances that can become apparent relatively quickly. And then we start to talk about, okay, what levers are in place? What levers can we put in place that can be pulled to get you closer to your targets, right? And it's really about outlining initially, this is the approach we can take. This is the impact it can have. And it gives business owners a little bit of success right off the bat, a little bit of an understanding of what's possible for them right off the bat. And it's really powerful.
That's awesome. How much does it cost?
Again, the profit rebuild assessment, initially, the complimentary, is free for any business owner. And usually lasts about 30 to 45 minutes. And then from there, if strategic solutions or fractional CFO work is something that they're interested in, then we can have a discussion for what meets their needs.
Awesome. Well, if someone's listening to this and they're thinking, you know what, I can't pass up such a great free opportunity, how can they get in touch with you to take advantage of that?
We're going to share with my direct email right here. Reach out to me directly. I'll get back to you, and I'll be the one to meet with you if you're seeing this video. SmileyStrategy.com, my website right there. I do have a team of executives as well that we can leverage for strategic needs, and looking forward to helping any business owner that knows they can grow, that knows that they can do more, and they want someone on their team to help them do that with confidence and strategic financial clarity. I'd love to have a conversation and see if we're a good fit for each other.
Awesome. Gianna, any closing comments or questions for Austin?
Nothing for me today. Thank you, Austin. That was great.
Thank you so much, Gianna. Thank you, Stuart. Pleasure speaking with you both.
Awesome. Likewise. And for the viewers and listeners, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next one.